Good evening to the head table, which are the members of the Constitutional Reform Commission. We at the Barbados Labour Party are indeed very happy that you accepted our invitation to come to consult with us, the members of the National Council of the Barbados Labour Party, this evening. And for that, I want to applaud you. Thanks to the members of the National Council and the wider BLP family for taking time from your busy schedule to be part of this evening's consultation. I welcome one and all the tasks this evening. I will hand over to our chairman of the BLP's Constitutional Committee, Mr. Winston Stafford, who will introduce the members of his committee, and then he will hand over the meeting to the chairman, Mr. Blackman. Thank you.
Good evening, all. Good evening. Can I, on behalf of the Barbados Labour Party, welcome you to 111 Roebuck Street and hope that you could have an edifying and helpful and fruitful afternoon with you. Can I say thank you, and can I hand over now to Justice Blackman as the chairman of this commission? Thank you.
I introduce very much the persons who are with me. At the far end, Deputy Chair of the Commission, Senator Gregory Nichols. Next to him is Commissioner Kahil Kathiwalda. On my immediate right, Commissioner Sade Jimmat. On my immediate left, Commissioner Chris DeCaries, and at the end, Commissioner Sulman Balbulia. I have apologies for the unavoidable absence of Commissioner John Rogers, who had a conflicted engagement with his church council at this time. The secretary, who has a teaching engagement, Carrie Ann Eiffel, had hoped to be here, but she's not feeling well, and I have not heard so far from Commissioner Brathwaite or Redmond. They may well show up before the end of the evening. I'd like to thank you for agreeing to meet with us. This is really very much more your meeting than our meeting, in that we want to come and hear your concerns that you'd like the Commission to take on board. In that we have received, since our launch and appointment back in June of last year, close to 200 submissions of one form or another. They're coming in constantly. Today I got 3. We have a document circulating. It has, on the face of it, 1,200 signatures on what they call a parent's petition, and they cover a multitude of topics. I am interested in some of the things that have been indicated that you wish to speak about, and I will hope that, notwithstanding that you seem to have had a cabinet apportionment of responsibilities of what you will speak on, that we will hope that other people within this audience will feel able to make a contribution on what they think they would like to see in the Constitution. The Constitution that was that we had at independence in 1966 was largely something of which there was really little or no broad participation. And even when the amendments came in 1974, it was ditto. This is an opportunity unlike any other, where everyone has a chance to make an input as to what should be the Constitution that is going to regulate Barbados for at least the next century. Because constitutions are not normally changed willy-nilly. Process of getting 2/3 majority in both houses makes it something that is approached very rarely and very gingerly. So, Mr. Stafford, sir, you would like to say who's the first one to speak on your behalf? Where is he? Oh. Mr. Lane, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I was told that I may not have expected a minister, but I'm glad that you are here to join us. Thank you so much. Yeah, who's going to be first to speak? Mrs. Odell. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to say first thank you to the chairman and the other commissioners, as well as the ladies and gentlemen in the audience. I hope to present a position that I'm sure we can all agree with. When I chose the Barbados Labour Party, I did not do so out of family loyalty or out of some form of bandwagonism. I did so knowing that this party was one that is on a mission of transformative work for this country. From our very inception, with the man called Moses of his time, Sir Grantley Adams, the Barbados Labour Party has championed transformative legislation, such as Adult Suffrage Act, which moved this country from a place where representation was the exclusive right of those with money and land, and moved the position of one man, one vote, and started the revolutionary position of active citizenry in this country. It was the Barbados Labour Party who formed the Barbados Workers, the Barbados Workers Union was formed out of the Barbados Labour Party. And the transformative work of the unions kicked into high gear with Sir Grantley Adams as its first president. It was the Barbados Labour Party who introduced the Holidays with Pay for Workers Act, the introduction of free secondary education, the Ford Commission, which was the catalyst for many landmark pieces of legislation, such as the Status of Children Reform Act, the Family Law Act. We moved positions that outlawed bastardry and legitimized common law relationships. The Termination of Pregnancy Act, along with the promotion of family planning and birth control, allowed women in this country to have full bodily autonomy. And the truth of the matter is, that act alone allowed the standard of living for women and children in this country to rise. Unlike others who believe that you create one piece of transformative legislation and then flog it like a dead horse, as though you are trying to raise Lazarus, the Barbados Labour Party believes that our continuous action must be to promote legislation that moves Barbados forward. And what I have mentioned is just a sample of our work. Because at our core, we believe in this country. We believe in our people and in our future. And hence it is my pleasure to lead this submission on 2 points: religious tolerance and freedom, and parental responsibility. While many have claimed Barbados to have always been a Christian society, I would instead argue that it has always been a faith-based society. For in 1654, there is a Jewish synagogue built not far from where we stand. And we welcomed a group of persons who prayed differently than we did, who spoke the name of their Creator differently than we did, who viewed concepts of heaven and hell differently. In 1950, we had the first official mosque established. But truthfully, our Muslim brothers and sisters have been with us much longer than the establishments of their places of worship in this country. They've done business with us, broken bread with us, been to school with us, and sometimes intermarried with us. My point is that we Barbadians have always been in the practice of accepting other faiths and their right to practice those faiths in this country. So now, as we come to the point of being a fully actualized republic, we must honor that by ensuring that the Constitution reflects a multi-faith society in all ways, in all words. I know that there are some at home watching me who may be upset, whose religious fervor leads their minds to this belief that they must be in the vanguard of clawing back what they see as a Christian Barbados. I am a Christian, and so I see this from a Christian point of view on 2 points, on 2 particular stances. The first is that of love. The Bible speaks of love in many ways and in many places. Galatians 5:14 says, "For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command, love your neighbor as yourself." Hebrews 13:1-2 says, "Keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for in doing so, some people have shown hospitalities to angels without knowing it." And finally, Philippians 2:3, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself." And hence, I would argue that the call to love is the most sacred of the Christian religion. And the second is free will. Those of us of the Christian faith understand that we are each given a choice, a right to self-determination by our God. And hence, who are we now to try to take that right from others? Because by choosing to have this highest of documents only reflect one faith, only reflect some of us, what we are doing is signaling to those of us who are not of that faith that we do not really respect or want their faith to be reflected in the fabric of who we are as a society. And hence, there is an argument made that you cannot just shift willy-nilly people's values because morality cannot be legislated. And in that argument, I agree. Morality should not be legislated, and hence it should not be reflected in our Constitution. Instead, it should reflect a multi-faith society because the facts are clear. Whether we do cling to labels or to the pontification that we are a Christian society, as we often do, the bold and unquestioned actions of our foreparents, our culture, and our very being speaks to a people that reaches out and accepts all in our multi-faith society. But that faith respects and celebrates both the faith in a higher power, whatever you choose to call your creator, but also the faith in yourself, where you can see no creator. We are all Barbadian. Whether by choice or by birth, we are Barbadian. We choose to pledge allegiance to this country. We choose to work together towards its betterment and to build a better society for all its people. And hence, the highest document of this land should always reflect that very Barbadian position of religious freedom and of tolerance. The second concern I would like to address is that of parental rights and responsibilities. We as a country have spent years in discussion about the decline of our society, often centered around the church and how it doesn't do enough, centered around the schools and how they don't do enough, centered around what seems to be the disappearance of the extended family. We have wrung our hands and pointed fingers and demanded solutions. However, there is only one entity with first responsibility for children: their parents. The role of parents in raising and rearing of their children is of inestimable value and is deserving of praise and protection by all levels of government, one legal scholar contends. Parents have the choice in bringing life into this world, and those choices carry significant rights. It carries the right to decide on your child's education, to teach them your value system and beliefs, to decide on their form of discipline and of medical treatment they will receive. To the extent that expression of rights does not harm the child. It is the sole discretion of those parents. But I would like to put forward the position that those rights come with responsibilities. In Pierce versus Society of Sisters, it is noted that the child is not the mere creature of the state. Those who nurture him and direct his destiny have the right, coupled with the high duty, to recognize and prepare him for additional obligations. Some of us as parents are abdicating our responsibilities in this society. We declare that the schools must teach our children morals and values, when teachers are rightly focused on curriculum and training, when their value system might not fit ours, and when they are focused on the 30-plus students at a time, when you only have the obligation of your 1 or 2 or 5. Are we not placing an unreasonable burden on our teachers and on our schools? We declare that the church must teach our children morals and values. And while they play a role, children look towards examples. There is no example followed more closely by children than their parents. Are we exhibiting the morals and values that we want our children to follow? Let's be honest with ourselves. A perfect example is that we see young men and women quick to anger, ready to fight, ready to do bad, happy to steal or to lie, and we shake our heads and we blame the church, the schools, the music, the movies. But in many cases, what did they see from their closest example? Are we as parents responding in anger to every situation? Are we stealing and cheating in small ways or in large ones? Are we teaching our children bad habits which evolve into significant character flaws and then relying on the church to fix them? Are we placing an unreasonable burden on our churches when you send your child every Sunday for 2 to 3 hours and expect them to send you back a child full of sterling morals and values? The truth is, my firm belief is that parents have not only a responsibility to their children, but also to society, to care for our future. Some argue that the most overused statement is that the children are our future. Whitney gave us a timeless ballot on it. CEOs and pastors and politicians give you entire speeches on that point. And as cliches as some of us might find it, it is the simple truth. They are all that is left of us someday when we have all turned to dust. Our generations, the children of our society, are what will be left of us. Parents must be compelled to do their duty. Given how critical the upbringing of our children has proved to the lived day-to-day reality of this society, because we experience the poor parenting choices, which some have unfortunately wrought. Their rights must be acknowledged. I fully believe that. Their rights must be protected. But also, they must be held to the highest of standards and expectations for those duties. And those should be reflected in our Constitution, because our Constitution means very little if it does not address our future. Thank you.
Chairman, commissioners, audience, good evening. You heard from the preceding speaker the storied tradition of the Barbados Labour Party in relation to questions of equality. And it is in light of that storied tradition of this party that the Barbados Labour Party views this constitutional reform process as an opportunity at this important juncture to expand further the rights citizens enjoy and to ensure that vulnerable citizens benefit from the protection of the law provided by the country's most fundamental legal document. As we do, we must employ a constitutional imagination that stretches further that already living legal document to make space and ensure equality for and dignity of all this country's people, especially those whose circumstances are made dim summarily by the prospects of their life. Persons with disabilities, children, and the elderly are key populations that require such protection and whose rights and well-being are compromised by the absence of such. Notably, issues of these populations are all currently being addressed on the legislative agenda. As many of you are aware, the Child Protection Bill has been laid in the Parliament. The draft Disability Bill and Policy will be finalized and taken before Cabinet shortly, and the Elderly Policy consultation is in its earliest stages. However, the party believes that creating constitutional space and enumerating rights and protections against non-discrimination on each of these grounds and for each of these groups is both of critical normative and practical importance. And now I turn my attention to those groups. It is unquestionable that children require protection because of their particular vulnerabilities to things like abuse and the fact that their quality of life is very much determined by what we, the adults, do around them, and by extension, what the societies in which they live believe in. The South African Constitution states that every child has the right to basic nutrition, shelter, healthcare, social services, as well as the right to be protected from maltreatment, neglect, abuse, and degradation. Similarly, the Constitution of Brazil ensures a vast portfolio of rights, including the full protection and access to social security, marking children as a protected class and then engaging our imagination about the ways in which we both protect and inspire children is critical to the prospects not only for those children and youth, but for the country as a whole. What if our imagination led to the protection of our natural and marine environments in the name of the youngest generation, our right to health, or culture? Similarly, persons with disabilities are a significantly marginalized group in the country and suffer discrimination at multiple levels while benefiting only from a spattering of legal protections. The community's ability to live, work, recreate is impeded by the country's historically problematic and discriminatory view of and treatment with that community. The inability of citizens with disabilities to benefit from the protection of the law in its broadest sense is an impediment to them living full lives and claiming the benefits of citizenship. The current situation creates a reality in which there are citizens without redress and recourse, no matter the nature of the human rights violation they're made to endure, whether it happens in the context of education, employment, healthcare, or in any other sector. It may perhaps be easiest to add a disability to the protected grounds of the Constitution, thereby joining 27% of countries around the world that explicitly prohibit discrimination on the basis of disability. However, it would perhaps be more desirable to go further into an enumeration of the circumstances in which discrimination, the community of persons with disabilities face discrimination, and with some granularity prohibit those. The elderly are a key population which should enjoy protection by society because, like all the other groups previously discussed, they face discrimination and, in addition, should benefit from legal protections. Therefore, the Barbados Labour Party is committed to ensuring legal protections of the elderly. Notable protections around the world include protections from abuse and all forms of violence, and additionally, a right to medical attention and social care. And that, of course, would be desirable as we seek to encourage a good quality of life throughout the lifespan. One of the issues which surfaced during the party's discussion regarding the elderly is the right to die or dignified death for the terminally ill, but for other groups as well. Well, not only for the elderly, I should say. Research indicates that there is some jurisprudence that connects an individual's right to self-determination and the right to die. The party encourages the Commission to consider the connection with a view to privileging the individual's right to autonomy, or as one German common law decision puts it, an understanding of life and respect for the individual's understanding of their quality of life. Gender. Issues relating to gender have been mainstays in our socio-legal spheres in Barbados and countries around the world, and countries have for years attempted to settle the tensions between sexes and eliminate the attendant social realities that have subjugated one sex for another, thereby making the experience of some, mainly women, fraught. These issues remain and perhaps have become even more expanded as more complex issues of gender have been raised and perhaps more to the point have shifted our traditional ideas. Even as conversations evolve, the settled position of this party is that gender should not be a basis for discrimination in this country. As a country, we must appreciate that persons, citizens, should be protected and respected regardless of gender. Further, they ought to be permitted the space to, like I said earlier, live, work, and recreate in the land of their birth without enduring the sometimes plain and sometimes pernicious vagaries of prejudice and discrimination. Citizens should enjoy equality as they seek to engage with the state and as they seek to contribute and interact with organs of this country, and do so with the full benefit and promise of full citizenship. This is the party from which the first female member of parliament and the first female cabinet minister and, of course, the first female prime minister came. It is in that tradition that we make space for persons previously left out of the national project and to ensure that the prospects for who they can be and what they can achieve are not made dim by who they are. In summation, I will borrow the words of the President of the Caribbean Court of Justice when he says, "Difference is as natural as breathing. Infinite varieties exist of everything under the sun. Civilized society has a duty to accommodate suitably differences among human beings. Only in this manner can we give due respect to everyone's humanity. No one should have his or her dignity trampled upon or human rights denied merely on account of difference." In that same vein, this party encourages the Commission and all of us to imagine a constitution that not only protects the groups I have discussed, but adopts equality as an ethos and in so doing buttresses the rights of marginalized groups with a broad and enforceable right of equality that creates, affirms, and protects the idea that Barbados belongs to us all. Thank you.
Commissioner Redmond has joined us, and I'd also like to welcome the Member of Parliament for St. Andrew and Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Water Resources, Mr. Rommel Springer. Welcome. Next speaker.
Members of the Constitutional Reform Commission, comrades, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome this opportunity. Like my colleagues have echoed earlier tonight, the Barbados Labour Party welcomes this opportunity. It is the evening to participate in a process that is of fundamental importance to us as a democracy. It is important to our country, it is important to our party, and it is important to me as a daughter of this soil. I fully support the method of engagement that we have been using to address this constitutional reform process. I have full respect for engaging the length and breadth of Barbados as active citizens in this country, and for each and every one of us to be afforded that opportunity to have some influence on what our Constitution should look like. So this evening, I really stand with a perfect example of active citizenship, where we can be involved in the development of our Constitution as we change ranks to a republic. So it is important then to understand the concept of active citizenship. And I'm hoping that it is accounted for in the framework of the new Constitution of Barbados. Active citizenship expands the potential for a greater socially just and more fair, or a fairer society. Through active engagement of our citizens on matters of public concern, on matters that will affect us as a country. This very forum reaffirms the commitment of the Barbados Labour Party in protecting the fundamental rights and freedoms that were hard fought and won by our ancestors during the 1800s, during the 1900s. And up to today, this party remains strict guardians of our faith, and as we continue as a party to charter the way forward for future generations, using modernized models of democracy. Only last year it was that the Prime Minister spoke at the Summit of Democracy that was hosted by the President of the United States. And she drew attention to the importance of the democratic ideals that are required to underpin relations within the context of international community. At the level of country, active citizenship accounts for the broad understanding of our citizens. It has the potential for mitigating risks. It has the potential for creating opportunities. And more importantly, it facilitates the inclusion of ordinary Barbadians on matters of importance, matters that will determine our survival and matters that will determine our prosperity. Article 3 in the Charter of Barbados 2021 states that every Barbadian has the right and a duty to participate in economic, political, and social life of Barbados as an expression of active citizenship. So we have that right. Every Barbadian has the right to vote, to seek public office in accordance with the laws of the country. So that is a direct quote, Article 3 from the Charter of Barbados. From a cultural perspective, active citizenship expands on an age-old, widely accepted African proverb that states, it takes a community to raise a child. Mr. Chairman, If our communities are to raise our children, we must have opportunities to participate. We must be afforded opportunities to have a voice, to vote, and then to act. We cannot sit idly by and let others determine our path. This can be afforded with active citizenship, playing a fundamental role in the framework of our Constitution. And through structures of civic engagement, structures that support ordinary citizens as they seek to shape a thriving, responsive, and resilient community and society. Communities that give support to the elderly, to the youth, to the disabled, to the vulnerable groups and individuals. All of this is relevant to the Constitution for strengthening our country's vibrancy as a parliamentary republic and democratic society. But it goes even further. Active citizenship confronts and seeks to demolish past and existing inequalities. Active citizenship stands to increase the chances of our children and families to enjoy a safer and healthier socioeconomic environment that is fit for realizing our individual goals and aspirations. The recent COVID-19 pandemic, the presence of climate change, the rapid advances in technology have categorically signaled to us as a nation that it is not business as usual. The speed at which life is changing from the way we know it and the way it is evolving requires citizens to become more actively involved in all dimensions of engagement, social, economic, political, that are of public concern. A typical example of civic engagement that we can relate to this evening is the high level of information sharing that occurred through this government and under this government's lead in the response to the unprecedented and turbulent conditions brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. So active citizenship affords us the opportunity to always be properly informed for good decision making. To embed active citizenship in the framework of the Constitution of Barbados is to emphasize lifelong learning. It is to emphasize and strengthen democratic citizenship. And it helps citizens take active responsibility in more constructive ways that reasserts our allegiance to fellow citizens and to our country. The other issue I wanted to speak on is corporal punishment. And I want to state first, because I am having difficulty staying on course given that my background is in social work. I want to state that while violence, and I'm equating corporal punishment here to violence, while violence has always been among our human experience, comrades, it has never been accepted as it was never socially accepted as a problem-solving method within the family, within the community, or within our schools. It was never truly accepted as a method of problem-solving or resolving conflict. So whether physical conflict occurs as a result of physical harm in the home, or physical harm against women, or physical harm against animals, as one of my students said earlier today, that you're allowed to, you can be punished for brutalizing animals, but you can't be punished for brutalizing children. She was not fully accurate. but I understand the concept of what she was saying. So whether it is a case of domestic violence in our homes, violence or physical harm in our homes or in our schools or in our community, corporal punishment is still a method of administering harm. And under the hat of a social worker, I have seen firsthand the psychological erosion of physical harm on children. And the reason that I'm having difficulty grappling with this particular issue is because I am still not clear if we understand where corporal punishment stops and where physical abuse begins in the administration of punishment. Sometimes we continue to operate on the false premise that all parents are good parents. Then again, not all parents are bad parents. So you will have arguments that suggest a little lash here or there doesn't hurt. You may have arguments that suggest I'm not going to hit my child at all. I'm going to punish them and take away the cell phone. I'm going to use more disciplinary measures that does not reduce the dignity of my child. So sometimes you hear that being communicated. This is telling me, or telling us, it says to us, that maybe there's room for more dialogue, given that some of us are still in favor of corporal punishment and can see the benefits of corporal punishment. Others are saying it ties us too deep to our colonial past, where pain was inflicted as a means of submission, and they want to break that psychological barrier. So we suggest maybe that there needs to be more dialogue on this issue of corporal punishment. Unfortunately, our laws as they stand now do not give our children full protection. And this stands in violation of our Human Rights Declaration, where we have signed on as a country in support of the measures and provisions, the articles that are set out in that document. And what is interesting is that we now have the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which could tell us that maybe they were still not as protected as we would like under the Human Rights Declaration. Barbados have signed both declarations. And under Article 3 of that convention, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we have the responsibility as a country to protect our children from all forms of physical harm. It is proposed that in the reforming of the Constitution, that more dialogue is required on this particular issue so that we can understand what the full perspectives are of our citizenry, so that as we move forward, we are reflecting the views of our citizens. This is my submission to you at this time, and I thank you.
Before we have the other speaker.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jamila Burgess, and like my comrades before me, I am honored to present this submission on behalf of the party. The Barbados Labour Party, through various legislative interventions and acts, has demonstrated their commitment to protecting the fundamental rights and freedoms of our people. And more particularly, we have championed the cause of protecting Barbadians' sexual and reproductive health and rights. This is evident through our efforts in the establishment of the Barbados Family Planning Association through an Act of Parliament in 1954, the introduction of maternity leave and maternity benefits, the creation of the drug service, the development of polyclinics, and the establishment of the Caribbean's first hostel for persons living with HIV and AIDS, just to name a few. While these efforts have been important and beneficial to the growth and development of our people, times have changed. And an assessment of the rights and freedoms outlined in our Constitution resoundingly shows that amendments must be made if we are serious about making life better for our people as it relates to their sexual and reproductive health and rights. We reflect upon the tenets and the preamble of the Charter of Barbados, in particular being ever conscious that the work of dismantling past and present iniquities and the building and sustaining of strong communities in their place requires us to confront legislatively, morally, and sensibly the problems and difficulties faced by our most vulnerable citizens through our daily choices and actions. With this in mind, there is urgent need to address the following. Firstly, the medical age of consent. This issue affects our youth aged 16 to 17, and regrettably, the Constitution affords no protection. In examining this issue, we found the article entitled A Legal Gap Analysis of Adolescent Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights in Barbados, prepared by Ruth Henry, Attorney at Law, to be instructive. Our current legislation provides that a child becomes an adult at age 18, but the age of sexual consent is 16. Further, there is no legislation which explicitly prevents our youth aged 16 to 17 from accessing sexual reproductive services and treatment without parental consent. This anomaly therefore raises this question: should youth who are aged 16 to 17 be able to access medical, sexual, and reproductive services and treatment without parental consent? The confusion and insufficiency of the legislation has contributed to young people being refused and deterred from even inquiring about sexual and reproductive health treatment and services for fear of the consequences on the basis that the legal age at which children become adults is 18. The result? Young people having unprotected sex, becoming susceptible to STIs or STDs. Teenage pregnancies resulting in children rearing children and lacking the maturity and responsibility to be parents. An increase in abortion statistics, an increasing burden on social services in circumstances where young people do not have the resources. Our youth's quality of life may be affected or diminished. There is lack of awareness among the youth about their bodies from a medical perspective, and many young mothers end up seeking maintenance in courts. We understand and appreciate the need to protect children and minors from early sexualization, but this must be balanced with the need to protect our youth aged 16 to 17 by allowing them access to contraceptives and medical services. A 16-year-old is deemed responsible enough to drive and have sex. So shouldn't youth aged 16 to 17 have the right to make choices about their sexual and reproductive health without parental consent? We submit that the answer must be a resounding yes. The second issue, the right to bodily autonomy, sexual autonomy, or sexual intercourse. And the question is, should Barbadians have a right to bodily autonomy, sexual autonomy, or sexual intercourse? We believe we should. However, the Constitution provides little protection regarding the same right to bodily autonomy, and that is individuals being able to control and freely decide when making choices about their bodies, or the right to sexual autonomy, which is individuals being able to maintain an informed decision over one's body, one's sexuality, and one's experience. And of course, the right to sexual intercourse, which is basically self-explanatory. In our opinion, the intricacies of the issues raised, namely the medical age of consent, the right to bodily autonomy, sexual autonomy, or sexual intercourse, are better addressed through legislation. However, our supreme law, our Barbadian Constitution, must play its part by protecting and guaranteeing these rights for our people in a general way. We have a responsibility to adequately address and protect the unmet sexual and reproductive health rights of our people. This can be done by simply adding the right to privacy and the right to equal protection to the list of fundamental rights and freedoms in our Constitution. Currently, the Constitution affords citizens protection for the privacy of their home and other property. However, this does not contemplate the right to privacy for our people as a separate and distinct right. The right to engage in sexual intercourse is an intrinsic part of the right to privacy, and privacy invariably contains the right to bodily integrity, self-determination, and sexual autonomy. As such, the right to privacy is a fundamental right which should be included in our Constitution. Further, while the right to security of the person is guaranteed under the Constitution and includes a person's right to control his or her bodily integrity, this right does not go far enough in securing and guaranteeing the sexual and reproductive health rights of our people. The right to equal protection, on the other hand, will guarantee that all persons are treated in the same manner as others in similar conditions and circumstances unless there is a good reason not to. This means that in the same way that a person who is over the age of 18 years or older can access sexual and reproductive health services, young people aged 16 to 17 who are legally able to consent to sexual intercourse should be afforded the same right without parental consent. All in all, the right to equal protection will afford us as Barbadians the protection and right to retain control when making decisions over our body, our sexuality, and our sexual experience. It is our hope that the suggested amendments will be accepted by the Commission as an important step in rectifying the inequities and inequalities outlined. After all, we, the people, are the craftsmen of our fate. Thank you.
Chair. Okay, Rashana Trim. Chair, commissioners, comrades, good evening. I want to first express my gratitude at the opportunity to participate in the constitutional reform process and to make this submission, which I am sure is reflective of the general sentiments of my comrades. As I considered my submission, I believed it best to start where I stand. And as a member of the Barbados Labour Party and a trade unionist, the recognition of political parties and the right to join a trade union should be a feature in our constitution. The history and the legacy of the Barbados Labour Party has since its inception been rooted in a commitment to the working class, socialism, modernization, inclusivity, and development. Indeed, it is for that reason that the BLP welcomed Comrade Tony Moore, General Secretary of the Barbados Workers' Union, to serve as one of the Team BLP's parliamentarian, and in so doing, welcome Labour back to the bosom of the BLP, where it began. Indeed, those who know their history know that the BLP and BWU are sisters born of the vision, shaped by the same values, yet each having their own goals towards one mission. Therefore, it is no surprise that this proposal comes from the bosom of the party. Political parties and indeed trade unions are the cornerstones of democracy and development in Barbados. I mean, look at our national heroes. 4 of our 11 national heroes are trade unionists. The right to join a trade union should not be questionable nor deniable, but one codified by law, and we posit our Constitution. The right to organize pays homage to the work of trade unionists such as Clement Payne, Sir Frank Walcott, Sir Hugh Springer, Sir Grantley Adams, and others who still walk with us. Our history books are testament to the power of organizing labor and its role in preserving democracy and ensuring that the working class can protect their quality of life and safeguard their dignity. It baffles me to no end that the Constitution of Barbados is silent on the existence, definition, functions, responsibilities, and other crucial regulatory aspects of political parties, yet they are at the center of our electoral process. It is therefore time that we acknowledge and recognize political parties in the Constitution, as not only have they been part of the political landscape since the 1920s, we have, in both 2018 and 2022, seen the importance of being able to define what qualifies as a political party and how such bodies should be governed. What is clear is that in Barbados, we may not always have an opposition, if such is the will of the electorate, but we will definitely have political parties. And so we cannot regulate what we do not recognize, and it is for that reason that political parties and trade unions, which serve to champion and preserve the fundamental tenets of our democracy and development, should be represented in the Barbados Constitution. The final point that I want to speak on is one that is very dear to me. A core principle of Barbados's democracy must remain building on the success of the sons and daughters of the soil who came before us. As we embark on the process of constitutional reform, it is crucial that we codify some of our hard-won rights and freedoms. The reversal of Roe v. Wade by the United States Supreme Court stripped many women in the states, in particular, many persons in the states, in particular women, of the fundamental reproductive right to choose if and when to have a child. Barbados was the first English-speaking Caribbean country to legalize abortions, with the passing of the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act in 1983, spearheaded by Dame Billy Miller, as a Minister of Health under a BLP administration. While we may not fear reversal of such legislation, we believe it crucial to go a step further by codifying the implied right of personal autonomy. While currently there are no legal barriers to exercising personal autonomy, in 2023, women are still being asked for the consent and/or the permission of their partners or spouses to have medical procedures conducted. And we know that in 2023, this cannot stand. And it is for this reason that the Constitution must protect and in so doing allow for the courts to uphold the right of every Barbadian to make autonomous decisions about their own body and reproductive system. Article 1 of the Charter of Barbados states, all Barbadians are born free and equal in human dignity, rights regardless of age, faith, class, cultural and educational background, ability and sex, gender, or sexual orientation. As we continue to define what Barbados looks like for Barbadians in a brand new constitution, let us do so ensuring that we commit to Article 1 of the Charter. Thank you.
Chairman, members of your commission, ladies and gentlemen, comrades all. My name is Kurt, K-U-R-T, Haynes, H-A-Y-N-E-S. And I'm proud to write my name on history's page and to contribute to your commission. I am the third vice chairman of the Barbados Labour Party, so I know quite a bit about the history of the Barbados Labour Party because I'm interested in the Barbados Labour Party. And I can tell you, and everyone here tonight, that you cannot build a nation without empowering our citizens. How we do things, with and for whom we do things, will always be as important as what we do. It's as simple as that. And as the most mature political party on this island, all of our decisions and actions matter. And we recognize that democracy and strengthening that democracy is important, hence we're here tonight. Some argue that the Westminster system model centralizes too much power in the hands of too few. And as we undertake to join you in reviewing the Barbados Constitution with a view to reform it, we too intend to voice our support and guard against the further entrenching of the establishment and the political class. That may be surprising to some, because we're a political party. We care about power, maintaining power. But we're here to say that we are calling for a change also, to reorganize the relationship between the citizen and the state, and vice versa. Do I have your attention? Very much so. All right. An energetic, participatory, and fully inclusive approach to the administration of our public affairs of our country at all levels is required. And we do support the adoption and use of people assemblies as opposed to local government, as outlined in the Thorne Commission's report, to ensure that wider participation among the people happens. This will ensure that citizens may influence the work of Parliament and also the executive, and this also permits Barbadians to have a truer role in the decision-making process. Simple. It will deepen our system of government because it's closer to the people. We have had no parliamentary reform since 1971. That was before I was born. That's when we moved from single-member constituencies to double-member. Sorry, the other way, from double to single. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm glad that the Parliamentary Reform Commission, headed by Sir Richard, and many distinguished Barbadians, has been reconstituted to provide recommendations on how our legislature could be transformed to better suit the needs of Barbados. I look forward to participating. This is my warm-up. I look forward to reading the committee's final report also, and that body of research complementing your own work onto how we can craft a new way forward. Insofar as the current political system is concerned, I am not sufficiently convinced that the existing bicameral form should be abolished. Some people have been pushing for a unicameral system where it's just one house. Our view is that two houses should remain. However, we hear the overriding call for some modification to this system, particularly in the composition of the Senate, the upper house, principally to provide for more representatives from those who do not necessarily support the government of the day. Other recommendations which we wish to make to the Constitution Review Commission, and I wouldn't elaborate on all of them, I will just list them. Some are controversial, some are salacious, some are not as sexy as Jamila's contribution, but I think they make sense. We believe we should maintain the president, she or he, elected by an electoral college, also with fixed terms. That's pretty straightforward. The system of government should remain a parliamentary democracy with the substantive executive authority exercised by the cabinet and headed by a prime minister still. The right of every citizen to vote in an election of members of the House of Assembly and the right of every citizen to be qualified for a membership therein, that has to be entrenched in our Constitution as a fundamental right. Provisions regulating the Electoral and Boundaries Commission should be a separate chapter in the Constitution. Constitutional arrangements maintained stating the Electoral and Boundaries Commission are required to revise constituencies when major changes in the distribution of population occur should be in the Constitution. I've heard calls from George Street about fixed terms for a prime minister or a government. In our opinion, the best safeguards against the abuse of office are the will of the people at a general election. And we've had leaders with the good sense to only remain when the people want them. So it's an automatic check and balance. There should be no maximum cap on the numbers in a cabinet that the Prime Minister should be able to appoint. He or she should have the access to the requisite human resources needed to execute the agenda of the government or the party at the point in time. Provisions should be made in the Constitution for the office of a Deputy Prime Minister. With the appointment of the Deputy Prime Minister from among elective members of Parliament. Provisions should be made in the Constitution for the role of Senior Minister. Some on the Commission might agree with this. The qualifying age for membership of Parliament should be 18 years and above. The present system of the first past the post should remain. There are some who believe in a blend of proportional representation. Yes, our view is you win, the most votes, you win. Constitutional changes should not go to the ballot or be subject to a referendum. As procedures for amending the Constitution of Barbados should remain with Parliament. Consideration should be made to provide that the Senate can debate money resolutions before expenditure on such resolutions is authorized. An expanded committee system in our Parliament, it gives rise to what Lisa was speaking about more public engagement, because in those committee systems, you can have public forums. Persons are allowed to speak and say what they want to happen. Politicians and ministers are entitled to respond to persons' queries, and it's way, way, way better for democracy. The consideration of mechanisms for the voices of persons who did not vote for the ruling party in a general election, they must be heard in the absence of the leader of an opposition. So perhaps some look has no, that's not the word I want to use. Some accommodation should be made for them. Thank you, Senator. Should be made for them. So not necessarily in a proportional representational sense, but you as a person of interest, a political party maybe, because there are more than two. When the Constitution was reviewed, there were only two. So if persons on the electorate voted for the party by a big enough majority or margin, they should have some say within the parliamentary system. And then there should be, I agree with Roshana, there should be a legal criteria established for the definition of a political party, because you have to know what you are to understand how they're regulated. So those are the simple recommendations in terms of parliamentary review. And thank you for listening to me, and I hope that it made some sense.
Good night, you and your committee, members of the audience, comrades all. If Jamila contributions stirred pot and Kurt when heated up, I believe my submissions this evening might do more than that. Might make it bite over. I have two topics to deal with. My name is Jefferson Payne, by the way. Yes. I have two topics to deal with this afternoon. One is candidate recall and MPs crossing the floor. The Barbados Labour Party wishes to recommend to this Constitutional Reform Committee the following two pieces of recommendations. These recommendations are new to the people of Barbados, sir. We also wish to inform this committee that these recommendations might find their way at the Parliamentary Reform Committee also. Candidate recall. Our laws as they stand now have mechanism to remove the president from office by the same MPs who elected the president, the Electoral College. Also, a prime minister can also be removed from office by the same MPs by using the no confidence vote, which might not be unlikely given the government's built-in majority at this time. I would also like to state that the Chief Justice can also be removed by a similar mechanism where the tribunal is initiated by the Prime Minister. But MPs elected to represent the voice and the views of the people who voted for them cannot be removed from office during their term by the said voters who elected them. The right of recall, therefore, to remove an MP for unsatisfactory performance and wrongdoing, like other representatives and people who hold high important offices, does not exist for MPs. The Barbados Labour Party believes that the right of recall is an important mechanism for accountability of holders of public office, seeing that we just passed the Integrity in Public Office Bill. Mr. Chairman, we therefore recommend that by a 2/3 majority of electors who voted for the MP, that a recall can be triggered to remove that MP whose performance is deemed unsatisfactory. At this time, I do not want to use no examples, please. I move to my next topic, MPs who cross the floor. Mr. Chairman, the Barbados Labour Party holds some very strong views on this particular activity. We believe that if an MP faces the electorate of this country on a ballot representing a particular party or contests the seat as an independent, and is successful to become the duly elected representative of the constituency in the Parliament of Barbados, then decides to cross the floor, a move that can have constitutional ramifications for good governance of the country. We therefore recommend that a by-election should be called and fresh elections held in that constituency. Mr. Chairman, my contribution was quite simple. Who guard the guards? I thank you.
Good evening, all. My name is Winston Stafford, and I've been given the task of presenting to this commission a recommendation which is right across this region is met with an equal response, and that is the abolition of the death penalty. Right across the region, there's never been an overwhelming vote, connection, relation to abolish or not to abolish the death penalty. So my task is a very difficult one, as I carry the burden as a member of the Barbados Labour Party in the position the Labour Party have not found itself in the position to abolish the death penalty. So I have to be loyal and to tread very carefully in my pronouncements on what I consider to be the right thing to do. We've had a series of meetings in our deliberations, and we ended up very equally divided in what we should say. So I have come down on a position that is advised by the decisions taken, one by the Caribbean Court of Justice in relation to capital punishment, and a few findings that are enshrined in research documents right across the region. And I will start by saying to you that in January 2018, the Caribbean Court of Justice noted that the mandatory life sentence was unconstitutional. In April 2019, Parliament passed a constitutional amendment on mandatory sentences for murder. However, an empirical study which presented the views of 100 opinion formers drawn from 7 jurisdictions regarding the violent crimes leading to death shed light as to why these countries hang on to capital punishment and what are the barriers to the complete abolition in these nations. During our preparation for this meeting, the parties support for the abolition of the death penalty to be removed from the Constitution of Barbados was agreed. This was confirmed by a further meeting. As a consequence of this, I wish to reflect on the reasons for the position taken by the Barbados Labour Party. On capital punishment, sorry, I've switched to pages. Leading to the shared light, I want to shed some light on what these countries hang on to in capital punishment. What are the barriers to the complete abolition of these nations? Across these 7 Caribbean nations, 48 out of 100 interviewed favored retention, with 52 favoring abolition, and only 18 of the 100 responding favoring any expansion for the use of the death penalty, or in the number of executions as likely to be effective. Only 10 of the 100 respondents endorsed more executions as likely to be effective in reducing the incidence of serious violent crimes leading to death. 90 did not choose it as an effective measure at all. In January 2018, the Caribbean Court of Justice noted that the monetary, again I repeated myself, I think this is a typical, across these 7 countries, only 10% of the yes. I think I've got the wrong notes here, but I will speak from memory. The facts are that the Barbados government has had 14 recommendations made by various international organizations, including a study done by the University of the West Indies, chaired by Professor Berry. And we have consented to registration with the United States Human Rights Commission. All others, we have not responded. We've had 48 recommendations made by another international body, and we've responded to 13. We've not responded to most of the UPRs and the United Nations, UNICEF, or none of the organizations that are renowned for working for the abolition of the capital punishment. It is believed by the Barbados Labour Party, and we've debated this from time to time, that this is time that it does not prevent people from committing crimes. What we think ought to be the position that we ought to have some rehabilitative measures adopted to enable people who might have offended to improve their conditions. An eye for an eye, what can lead actually to the world being blind. You cannot take life because someone has taken life. The possibility, state murder is state murder. Murder by the community is murder by the community. We need to embark on wider and broader educational programs to advise our people in relation to the lack of education, the provision of better conditions in our community for those who commit crimes, and this sociological evidence to indicate that crimes are committed generally, and particularly in our recent skirt of shootings. It is identified in certain deprived communities as more prevalent than in other communities. We need to look at equalizing opportunities, training, and this can only be done by community education. So I am suggesting that we do away with the death penalty in Barbados and removed from the Constitution, and we refer to more rehabilitative work with those who have committed crimes or commit murder. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Stafford, and the members of the National Council who made your presentations. I guess on behalf of the members of the Commission, I hope that those submissions will be submitted to us in writing so that I know we have taken a note of them and we have it recorded, but certainly I would like to get an opportunity to read and study them, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the other members of the Commission and the DG here to thank you for hosting us. I'm glad we're not in the AC. and we are happy to have received your contribution to the discussion. Certainly it was very spirited. I know every one of you, and I didn't expect any less of a performance from those members of the National Council. So thank you on behalf of the members of the Commission.
Commissioner, Senator Nichols, I realized that you were looking a little startled when I said we were given a time in which to do our consultations, and we would not want to deviate from that. So on behalf of the political leader, General Secretary, National Council, and members of the Barbados Labour Party, I want to say thank you to the chairman and members of the Commission for coming to our home so that we can have such a consultation. And I want to thank you, the family of the Barbados Labour Party, for turning out to make this consultation a success. Thank you very much.